Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to watch the video. Always appreciate that. And guys, today we're going to have some advanced theory, and we're going to talk about the reasons that actually a bass bites a lure. We've touched upon this a little bit in the past, but I don't think a lot of people realize that the bass that you catch rarely feed because they're hungry. There's other factors involved with that, and we're going to go over what those factors are and really tell you about how you can benefit from that, how you can take that into consideration as far as picking your techniques out that are the best for the situation. So we'll get into that in today's video. Also, guys, just wanted to give you a quick reminder that you guys hear me talking about this. If you guys like to give something back to the channel, Tackle Warehouse has got some really good fall fishing sales. They've got a Labor Day sale right now. Everything on the side is like 15% off. So I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description. If you guys use and bookmark that Tackle Warehouse link for all your fishing purchases, that's a good way to support the channel, and me and my family appreciate it. And also, guys, Solar Bat has the same Labor Day sale. They got some really good sales on my Signature Series glasses, and I'll include that link also, so really appreciate that. Okay, guys, one of the things that I really appreciate you guys tuning in for these videos, because ever since I've been doing YouTube videos, whenever I talk about bass behavior and sort of like the things that are sort of like classroom study where they're boring. I mean, it's like I'm like a sort of a college professor trying to teach you some type of boring subject. But if the people that are really eager to learn and gather and absorb information, this is right up your alley. So I've always said that this is the most important aspects of learning about to be a bass fisherman. It's not the best lures or the best techniques. It's about understanding bass on a very, very intimate level, very, very complex level, because people don't give bass the credit they deserve for how incredible they are. They're not these little pea-brained stupid creatures. They are survivors. They are apex predators in their environment. So today I want to talk about why bass bites a lure. What are the motivations that actually cause them to bite a lure? Now, before you get into this, one thing you have to realize is that you can't lump all bass behavior together like in one lake. It's like people say, well, the fish are doing this, or this is what the fish are doing today. Fish are individuals. They school, and fish will school up, and they'll, gather up at times, but they are still individuals in terms of the personality that each bass exhibits. And I've witnessed this, and I've studied it for so many years, and I'll give you an example. It's like, one of my favorite things to do is I like to watch bass swimming and cruising in the water, and I like to see how they react to different lures. Now, being in the Ozarks here, we have a lot of clear water, so I have the opportunity to do that. And a lot of times, for example, let's say in the springtime of the year, let's see, I'll see a bass cruising down the bank in real clear water, and sometimes I can throw like a wacky worm or something over there, and as soon as it hits the water, that fish darts out there and gets it as fast as it can. Other times, I'll see another bass the same day, maybe the same hour. Another bass will be cruising down that same bank, and I'll cast over to it, and that bass darts out there, darts away from the lure 100 miles an hour, like it scared it to death when the lure hit the water. And then some bass, you throw it over there, and they'll just slowly swim over there, and they may get 5 or 6 feet away from it and look at it and then swim off. So what is it that determines a bass's personality and mood like that? Because every one of them is different, and ultimately it's a mystery. There's nobody that has an answer to that. But nevertheless, there are some things that you can do to capitalize on the things that cause a bass to bite a lure. So I wanted to throw that little pretext out there, because what I'm about to tell you, it's like anything else in fishing, guys. There's nothing guaranteed. Bass don't read books, so I can tell you what bass should or shouldn't be doing. Some of them may be doing that, some of them might. That's why fishing's the toughest sport in the world. Okay, here's the thing. Bass rarely bite your lures because they're hungry. You know why? Because most bass feed at night. Bass are notorious nocturnal feeders. That's why anytime you go fishing at night, unless you're fishing in a muddy lake, the fishing's always better. The fishing is 10 times better at night. We could go like right now, here it is, the last week of August. If we went out and, like, say for example, you and I went out fishing, and we threw Texas rig worms on Main Lake points all day long here. we might not ever get a bite. You might catch one or two or something like that. We went out there the same night, say we went out the same day, and we let it wait till get 11 o'clock or midnight at night. We go back on those same points with those Texas rig worms, probably catch 30 fish at night, because most bass feed at night. So the ones that you catch on the daytime, they are don't get me wrong, they're opportunistic feeders, and they'll take an opportunity when they get it, but they're not actively feeding during the daytime of year. And that is why you have to determine, and you have to figure out what the level of aggressiveness of a fish is to determine the technique that gets them to bite the lure. Now, that is why so many bass fishing lures out there, there's two different categories pretty much. One of them are reaction strike lures, and the other ones are like more subtle lures, like slow moving lures that capitalize on the fish's curiosity a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the factors. In my opinion, here's why bass bite a lure. It's out of curiosity, it's out of competition, it's out of reflex, it's out of just the other every possible other factor out there except for being hungry. And the things that you need to capitalize on more than anything else is that sense of reaction and the sense of curiosity. Now, reaction strikes are the most consistent way to catch a bass most of the time, because you're capitalizing on this primal instinct that a fish has to get something before it gets away. In other words, let's say there's a bass living on a stump, and you throw a crankbait past that stump, and you're reeling that crankbait at pretty good speed past the stump. If that bass is sitting on that stump and that crankbait comes by there, it does not have time to analyze. It didn't have time to look at that crankbait and say, oh, is that something real? Is that something not real? Should I bite it? They have to act immediately. They either have to dart out there and grab it, or they have to ignore it completely. They don't have time to think about anything else, especially if the water's off colored. So that's why reaction strikes catch a lot, reaction baits like crankbaits, spinner baits, chatter baits, some swim baits, that type of deal. That's why they attract and they catch a lot of fish, is because you're capitalizing on that ancient primal instinct of a bass to be an opportunistic feeder. There's something that they can't resist it. It's almost like an involuntary action. And sometimes, you can also capitalize on the aspect of fishing that fish strike a lure by anger. Sometimes bass get angry and they just get pissed off at something, and that's why multiple casts to the same piece of cover a lot of times can generate strikes. Just casting to the same log over and over and over again, and eventually that fish just gets had enough of it and it comes out there and bites it. So that's one lure category. Now the other lure category is the more subtle curiosity type strikes. Now these are your slow lures. These are like your jigs, your plastic worms, football head jigs, your Ned rigs, shaky heads, drop shots on the bottom, anything like that. That is like those baits that go along the bottom. Now, if you're fishing these baits during low light conditions, like at night or maybe real early in the morning or in the evening, yeah, the bass will actually hit these things because they're feeding, they're actively feeding. But when you get a bite, a lot of times from a lure during the day, like if you throw, a jig, if you flip a jig in a bush, or if you throw a jig underneath a boat dock, or if you throw a jig off a point or on a bluff, usually what happens is when that jig or that slow moving lure hits the bottom, it creates quite a bit of noise, because even if you have an 1/8 ounce shaky head or a 3/4 ounce jig, when that thing hits the bottom, a bass can sense that from a long way away. I mean, it can find a minnow at midnight, and it can sure in the heck hear a 3/4 ounce or 1/2 ounce jig hitting a rock in 10 foot of water. So any bass within the area is going to get their attention. Now, some of those bass may ignore it. Some of those bass may come over and investigate. Some of those bass may come over immediately and hit it. But most of the time, that bass will come up to a slow lure, and it might get that far away from that lure, or even touch the lure with its mouth shut, because it's curious. It doesn't really know what it is, and they study that lure. And sometimes, based upon your presentation and how you're working the lure, or the color of the lure in relationship to the water clarity and sunlight conditions, sometimes they will bite that lure because they're out of curiosity, or maybe some element of being hungry to some extent. And that's, when you catch them on those slow moving lures. So you really have to determine, which technique is best. And for the most part, what you're going to find is bass that are in heavily fished waters or conditions where there's high light intensity, that type of deal, heavy fishing pressure. Those bass tend to stay on the bottom more, and those curiosity generating lures are going to be more productive. But the lures like your reaction strike lures tend to be better on lakes that don't quite have as much fishing pressure, or maybe if the conditions are a little adverse, low light conditions, windy type days. In general, that's when they like the reaction type lures a little bit more. So given that, the thing that you have to determine every day you're on the water, and this is one of the things I ask myself, are these fish in a chasing mood or are they not in a chasing mood? And a lot of that is just experimentation, because you don't know. For example, you could go out, let's say we're fishing boat docks, and the techniques that are available in boat docks, we could pitch or flip a variety of lures under that dock. We could throw a swim bait on the edge of the dock. We might run a crankbait down the edge of the dock. We might throw a chatterbait down the edge of the dock. And by rotating through there, you will find out in general what mood those fish are in. And a lot of times that has to do with the size of the fish. Sometimes the bigger fish may want a certain presentation and the smaller fish may prefer something else. But in essence, that is the thing that always needs to be on your mind is, what mood are the fish in? Do they want to chase, or are they hunkering down and they don't want to move very far? So without getting into a big 2-hour-long seminar, that's just sort of an overview of things that cause bass to bite a lure. Like I said, there's nothing that's set in stone. Everything that I tell you, everything that you hear on YouTube, anything that you read about bass fishing, take it with a grain of salt, because it sometimes it's applicable, sometimes it's not. And the things that I try to relate to you guys are the things that have worked for me over the years, things that I have seen that have given me reproducible results in fishing. And what I just covered usually has some of the stuff that has done that. So anyway, guys, hope it helps out. We'll talk later.